Hey class, this is Professor Carrig here. If you haven't had me before, my name is Dan Carrig, and I don't mind if you call me Professor or call me Dan or whatever you're more comfortable with. But I am here to talk to you about PSC 524, which is a course titled Public Policy Problems in the Masters of Public Administration program at URI. Um, I am going to release uh, the start here, this video, all the introductional materials, and the syllabus, so you can kind of get a sense of what work needs to be done. A couple days here now before the course actually begins, but I will not release the um, weekly to-do list until the course actually begins. So you won't be able to see everything until the course begins, and if you can't see everything, don't fret. Nobody else can either. But I did want to give you at least an overview of how the class is going to work and a way for you to kind of schedule out your time if you're worried about time commitments during this course. Now, the purpose of this course is to get you to think about public policy problems in a general and broad sense. I do teach other policy classes where we talk about specific policy areas. Um, so this is more the meta version of one of those classes. Where, like, if I'm thinking about public policy generally, and it could be any specific policy you could plug into this sort of general framework, be it energy, social welfare, immigration, transportation, health. All of them you can fit in. Um, how would that general framework work? And how should we think about that theoretically? And how does it tie into different areas of social science? That's really what I want to start to get you thinking about. So there's going to be a few different ways we're going to think about this. Um, and the easiest way to wrap your head around it is the picture just below this video, which is what we call the public policy cycle. And it's a 5-step cycle. It's traditional public policy theory. A sort of proto version of it goes all the way back to Harold Lasswell forever ago. And you can find that there are 5 steps here. And each one of the steps is going to correspond to a week in this course. Okay, so week 1 will just be an introduction. And then week 2, we'll talk about agenda setting, the first step on the policy cycle. Week 3, we'll talk about framing and priming, and sort of how you construct issue frameworks. That will be week 2. Week 3, we'll talk about formulating policy, how you actually get it deliberated, passed, promulgated, whatever you end up having to do. Week 4, we're just going to go to the 4th step there, and we'll talk about policy implementation, because a lot of times just because you got something passed doesn't mean it actually functions well when the rubber hits the road. There's a lot that goes into that, and that mostly is what the study of public administration is about, really. And then we're going to go all the way around to the 5th one, which is how are we going to evaluate whether or not our policy is successful, and what type of feedback effects might our policy create, meaning people in the normal high school book, civics book, schoolhouse rock, I'm just a bill on Capitol Hill style, think, okay, politics creates policies. But what if policies sometimes create their own feedback into politics? In fact, we know that they do. And so we're going to keep an eye out for that and how we can measure that too. Now, every one of these weeks, week 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, I'm going to ask you to do a short 3-question discussion forum. I want you to interact with each other on it. But you're going to be developing your ideas as you move forward. And the ultimate product of this course is going to be a policy paper where you come up with a strategy to create policy change that pays attention to the entirety of the policy cycle and works policy change through at every step of the way. So we will talk more about that during the weeks moving forward. But those questions are really to get you to start thinking about your paper. You're going to write a preliminary paper. I'm then going to ask you to peer review a few of your other classmates' papers. I'm going to ask you to actually reach out to professionals in the field today. They might be government workers, they might be legislators, they might be politicians, they might be nonprofit workers, they might work at interest groups, whatever they happen to be, and actually get feedback from them as well. I'm going to ask you to take all that compiled feedback, to put together a presentation for how you would best go about creating the policy change that you want to see, and I will let you define that, and we'll talk more about that as the weeks go. And then you are going to take that preliminary paper and craft it into a final paper based on all the feedback you got and developed in your presentation to finally submit at the end. So that's it. There will be readings every week. The readings will be these kind of general theoretical level readings, so sometimes we'll apply it to a specific case so you can see it in action, but mostly we're thinking at a very high level here of how policy operates. And that level is, first you got to set the agenda. You got to raise awareness. You got to get people thinking about the issue that you want them to think about, and you have to get it into their minds, and you have to get it into the front of their minds. You have to make it salient, right? Second, once you've made something salient and it's on the front of their minds, you have to frame it. You have to frame it in the way that it sounds positive to them, that it sounds like it is better than the status quo. And if you're trying to create change, it's hard, right? Because people kind of default to the status quo. So how you're going to frame the status quo is not desirable, and the change you want as desirable. That takes some work. Then you have to actually formulate the policy. You have to, whether it be draft legislation, draft regulation, formulate a courtroom strategy, a litigious strategy, multiple prongs, whatever it is you're going to do. You do it through treaties, right? There's multiple avenues here. You have to describe the avenues to which, or by which you could achieve the policy change you want to achieve, and how you expect to realistically travel those roads. Once you've done that, it has to be implemented, the change, by someone. So who is going to do that? Oftentimes that's an executive branch agency at the federal, state, or local level. And so we're going to have to think long and hard about who's going to enforce whatever this new change is, or who's going to make sure it happens, or who's going to watch it, or who's going to implement it. How's it going to happen? And then finally, we're going to have to think about, okay, by what specific measure, and these are going to be your variables, right? By what specific measure do we decide whether we succeeded or failed in our policy change, whether it accomplished its goal or not, or to what extent it accomplished its goal, and what type of feedback effects might we anticipate, and how might we use those feedback effects in a way we deem positive, and not have them work against us. Or if they are working against us, how might we overcome them, right? So we're going to think about that. We're going to think it all the way through. In the very last week, week 7, will just be the concluding week, where you finally upload short video presentations. It's about 10 minutes long, about what you're doing, what your plan is, and how you're going to work your issue through the entire policy cycle. And then I'm going to ask you to submit final policy papers. So it's a 500-point class. It breaks down that the final policy paper is going to be about 125 points. I believe it's 85 points for the preliminary. That's 100 points each for your peer reviews and outreach, and for your presentations. And there will be another 15 points each for each one of the weekly discussion forums. And we'll have 6 of them. We'll have an intro one on week 1. I'm not going to make one due for week 7. Week 7, you can just concentrate on the end. So that's my welcome video. That's a rundown of the course. It should be fun. You have a lot of freedom to work on whatever actually interests you. I recommend you try to think very exactly, and maybe it's easier to think locally than it is to think nationally, but I'm going to leave it up to you. We will discuss it as the weeks go on, and I will be reaching out to you as class begins to set up office hours that work for as many of us as possible, and to make sure that we are all on the same page. So that said, welcome to PSC524. I look forward to working with you over the next 7 weeks. Thank you.